"Doctor, please help my baby. She's so cold. Her hands, they won't move." That was the first sentence I said out loud that night. It came out of me raw and broken, like something torn loose from my chest. I wasn't thinking about dignity, or how I sounded, or who was listening. I was a mother standing beside a hospital bed, watching my daughter slip away while the machines around her kept time like a cruel metronome. My name is Leona Williams. I am 62 years old. I am a retired elementary school teacher, a widow, and the mother of one child, my daughter Tamara. And the problem I faced that night was simple to describe, even if it nearly destroyed me. My daughter was dying on an operating table, and the man who had sworn to love her for the rest of his life was nowhere near the hospital. Tamara lay in front of me in the ICU at Cedars-Sinai, her body impossibly small under the white sheets. Tubes ran into her arms and down her throat. A ventilator breathed for her with a sound that reminded me of waves breaking against rocks, steady, indifferent, relentless. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and when I touched her hand, it felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The doctors said it was a fall, a terrible accident. She'd been found at the bottom of the staircase in her home. Severe head trauma, swelling in the brain. They spoke in calm, careful voices, using words meant to soften the truth. But I knew better. I had taught children for 35 years. I knew when someone was trying to prepare me for the worst. "Where is her husband?" I asked. Not once, but 3 times. Each time, the nurses exchanged looks, pity, discomfort, silence. Her husband's name is Jaden Maxwell, and I need you to understand this clearly from the beginning. Jaden is not some stranger in this story. He is not a shadowy figure who appears later. He is the center of the betrayal. He is the man my daughter married, the man who lived in her house, slept in her bed, spent her money, and called himself her protector. And when she needed him most, he was absent. That fact alone was devastating, but it hit harder because I saw it coming. I had tried to stop it. God help me, I did. A few months ago, Tamara came to me in a whirlwind of urgency, asking for help. "Jaden's got a new opportunity," she said. "It's crypto, Mom. Real estate backed. He just needs a small loan to cover the buy-in, like $35,000. I remember the way I looked at her. My baby girl, a grown woman, eyes shining with blind loyalty. "Tamara," I said gently, "you already paid off his last loan. What happened to the stocks? And the app he said he was developing?" She stiffened. "Why are you always like this? You've never liked Jaden." I reached for her hand, calm but firm. "Because I see him, sweetheart. I see the way he looks at your checkbook more than he looks at you." Her face darkened. "You're just bitter. You don't want me to be happy because you lost Dad, and now you want me to be alone too." My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't just anger, there was something spiteful in it. I tried again, quieter this time, almost begging. "Tamara, please, just think. I'm not your enemy. Don't hand over everything you've built." She yanked her hand from mine. My balance wobbled. I fell backward, knocking the kettle off the counter. It spilled, splashing boiling water onto my arm. I remember the sharp pain, the hiss of the water hitting tile. But what hurt more was the way Tamara looked down at me, not with concern, but with blame. "If you hadn't grabbed me," she muttered, "none of this would have happened." She didn't apologize. She left. That moment stayed with me. It was the day I realized love could blind even the brightest souls. Now, I stood in that hospital, watching that same child, my wounded, wonderful girl, lie helpless. I pressed the phone to my ear, hand shaking. Voicemail. Again. "Jaden," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Tamara is in critical condition. The doctors need your authorization to perform emergency surgery. You need to come now." I hung up and tried again. Nothing. The attending physician approached me, his expression tight. "Mrs. Williams," he said gently, "we can't wait much longer. We need authorization from her legal next of kin." "That's me," I said immediately. "I'm her mother." He shook his head. "I'm sorry. It has to be her husband." Those words landed like a blow. I stood there, staring at my daughter, knowing that the power to save her life was sitting in the pocket of a man who wouldn't even answer his phone. That was when fear turned into something sharper, suspicion. Jaden had never liked hospitals. He said they made him uncomfortable. He preferred things that sparkled: restaurants with ocean views, expensive suits, champagne flutes clinking together under string lights. He liked attention. He liked being seen. So I made one more call. "Maribel," I said when the line connected. She had been our housekeeper for years before Tamra married Jaden. Loyal, observant. "Where are you right now?" "At the marina, Miss Leona," she answered. "Mr. Jaden asked me to help the staff. There's a gathering on the yacht." My knees nearly buckled. "What kind of gathering?" A pause. Then quietly, "A party." The world narrowed to a single, horrifying truth. While my daughter lay unconscious with her skull swollen inside her head, her husband was celebrating on a yacht. "What yacht?" I asked, though I already knew. "The Amelia's Dream," Maribel said. That yacht had been a gift from my late husband, a wedding present meant to symbolize safety, joy, and a future. Jaden had turned it into a floating stage for his ego, and now it was the place he chose to drink and laugh while Tamara fought for her life. I thanked Maribel and ended the call. My hands were steady now. Fear had burned itself out, replaced by something colder. I went back to Tamara's bedside and leaned close, my forehead touching hers. "Listen to me," I whispered. "I don't care what the law says. I don't care who I have to fight. You are not dying alone. Not tonight." As I straightened, I caught my reflection in the glass of the monitor, my hair disheveled, my eyes red, my face older than it had been that morning. But behind the grief, there was resolve. Jaden thought this was a moment he could skip, a crisis he could avoid, a life he could treat as an inconvenience. He was wrong. And that was the moment I understood something that would guide every decision I made after. If the system wouldn't protect my daughter, then I would. If you felt her pain, leave a like and drop your city in the comments below. Someone near you might be watching too. I used to believe there was no pain sharper than losing a spouse. When my husband, Curtis, passed away from pancreatic cancer 12 years ago, I thought my world had ended. But now, watching my daughter fighting for breath while her husband danced on a yacht, I realized something deeper, something darker: betrayal from the living cuts deeper than grief from the dead. I sat in the hospital waiting area, staring at the bland wallpaper, my fingers trembling around the phone in my hand. The last voicemail I left, Jaden still rang in my ears. He hadn't called back. Not a single word. Not even a message of concern. And while the doctors moved around Tamara's room, speaking in hushed tones, all I could think about was every moment I had ignored my instincts. I should have seen it. Hell, I did see it. Jaden was always too smooth, too polished, too curated. A man who smiled like he rehearsed it in the mirror. The kind of man who made waiters feel invisible and called Tamara babe like it was a placeholder, not a term of endearment. But Tamara, oh, my girl, she saw something different. Or maybe she needed to see something different. After Curtis died, it was just the two of us. We clung to each other through the grief, through the silence that filled the house. And then Jaden appeared, a bright light in her dark tunnel. He wooed her with flowers and rooftop dinners, with grand promises and attention that made her feel seen again. And I watched her fall, not slowly, not carefully, but like someone leaping headfirst into deep waters, trusting she'd float. I still remember the first Thanksgiving Jaden spent with us. He showed up 2 hours late, wore shoes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and brought a bottle of wine with a label so fancy I had to Google how to pronounce it. He charmed my sister, flirted with the cousins, and smiled at me just a bit too tightly. But it wasn't the wine or the charm that stuck with me. It was the way he asked Tamra for her credit card when he thought no one was looking. He whispered something, she laughed nervously, and passed it to him under the table. That was the moment I started keeping score. Of course I tried to be tactful. I pulled Tamara aside later that evening, asked if everything was all right financially. She rolled her eyes. "Mom, he's just between clients right now," she said. "It's temporary." Temporary turned into 2 years. Jaden never seemed to find stable work, but he always had new ventures, startups, cryptocurrency, private investments that sounded like smoke in a bottle. Tamra, always the loyal partner, always the believer, kept writing checks and making excuses. And then there was that day in my kitchen, the day everything cracked. I had just brewed a fresh pot of chamomile tea, the scent calming but bitter, like foreshadowing. Tamara burst in with her laptop, eyes glowing. "He's found something big this time," she said. It's commercial real estate, short-term investments, high ROI. All he needs is a little help with capital. I remember my response like a script engraved into my bones. No, she blinked. No, I'm not helping him, and neither should you. Her lips curled. You've never given him a chance. Because I don't trust him, Tamara. He's using you. He loves me. Then why does he keep draining you dry? Her hands clenched the laptop, her jaw tight. You're just bitter because Dad died and now you don't believe in love anymore. That accusation tore through me. That's not true, I whispered. I reached out, took her hand. Baby, please. I'm not your enemy. I'm your mother. I see what you don't want to see. She yanked her hand away so hard that I lost balance, stumbling back into the counter. The kettle tipped, and boiling water splashed across my arm. Pain exploded up my skin. Tamara gasped, but instead of rushing to me, she stood frozen. If you hadn't grabbed me? That was all she said. Then she walked out. I cried that night, not from the burn, though that hurt too, but from the realization that I had lost her to someone who didn't deserve her heart. Now, sitting in this fluorescent-lit hallway, I wiped a tear from my cheek, remembering that moment like it had just happened. My phone buzzed. It was Harper, my attorney and oldest friend from church. Lee, she said, voice low and steady, you told me to keep tabs on that boy. You were right to worry. He moved $10,000 from Tamara's account last week into a private LLC under his name. I closed my eyes. What kind of LLC? A shell, most likely. No staff, no website, no income. Can you send me the details? Already emailed. Also, she hesitated, he purchased a life insurance policy on Tamara. 3 weeks ago, $10 million. He's the sole beneficiary. My stomach turned. Is that legal? If she signed it, yes. And if she dies before that surgery? I get it, I said, my throat dry. He's betting on her death. Lee, Harper's voice softened. Do you want me to get the police involved? Not yet, I said. I need something more. I ended the call and stood, staring out the hallway window into the night. The city lights blurred behind my tears. Jaden wasn't just negligent. He wasn't just a bad husband. He was planning something, and I wasn't going to let him win. I went back into Tamara's room, placed a warm cloth gently on her forehead. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. I leaned in close. I know you think I was trying to control you, I whispered. But all I ever wanted was to keep you safe. And now, baby, now I'm going to do what no one else will. I pulled out my phone again. This time, I didn't call Jaden. I called Clarence. He picked up on the second ring. Leona, been a long time. I need a favor, I said. I need you to help me prove my daughter's husband is trying to kill her. Clarence Bennett had a voice like gravel soaked in bourbon. He used to be one of L.A.'s finest detective first class, known for cracking the kind of cases that kept other men up at night. After he retired, he became a private investigator, and more importantly, a man I could still trust in a world where trust was becoming a rare commodity. I hadn't seen him since Curtis's funeral. He'd shown up in a dark suit 2 sizes too big, hugged me tighter than anyone else that day, and didn't say a word. That was Clarence, a man who understood the power of silence. I hadn't intended to bring him back into my life like this, but here we were. Leona, he said, if this is what I think it is, we've got a real problem. It's worse, I replied, and I need you to move fast. My daughter's life depends on it. We met just past midnight at a small diner near the hospital. I barely noticed the peeling booths or the stale smell of old grease. My mind was fixed on the man across from me. Clarence had aged, sure, more gray in the beard, deeper lines around the eyes, but the way he looked at me told me the old fire was still there. You said Jaden was throwing a party? He asked, sliding a worn leather notepad from his jacket. On the yacht, Amelia's dream. He was laughing, drinking, while Tamara was being wheeled into the ICU. And now Harper just confirmed he took out a $10 million life insurance policy on her. He let out a long breath. That kind of money makes people do stupid things. Or evil things. He scribbled a few notes. I'll pull up the Shell Corporation first. Then we trace the insurance papers, see if Cassidy, his little sidekick, is tied to any of this. What's her last name? Davenport. She used to be Tamara's nurse. Perfect. That's enough to start. He tucked the notepad away, leaned back. If Jaden's planning something, he'll slip. They always do. People like him get cocky. I nodded, clutching my mug of cold coffee. Clarence, I want to do this by the book. I want justice, not revenge. You might end up with both, he said, dry as dust. We parted with a promise. I'd stay close to Tamra. He'd stay close to the money trail. Back at the hospital, Tamara's room was quiet but heavy with the hum of machines. I watched her chest rise and fall under the thin blanket, and I thought about the child I'd raised. About the way she used to fall asleep with her head on my lap, how she'd say, "Don't leave," even if I was just going to the kitchen. I thought about the scraped knees, the lost backpacks, the late-night ice cream trips after breakups. How did we get here? I sat by her bedside and whispered, "We're going to get through this, baby girl. You won't remember this part, but I will. Every second of it. And I'll carry it until you can laugh again." A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. One of the younger nurses, Marcy, peeked her head in. "Mrs. Williams, there's a man on the phone asking for you. He says it's urgent." I followed her to the nurse's station and picked up the receiver. "Lee," Clarence's voice rumbled. "You were right. I got a guy at the insurance office who owed me a favor. That policy? It was filed 3 weeks ago, rushed application. Cassidy was the one who handled the medical paperwork." My grip on the receiver tightened. She forged it? Either that or Tamra signed it under pressure. But here's the kicker. Cassidy's name is linked to 2 other suspicious insurance filings in the last 5 years. Both involved accidental deaths. Boyfriends. One in Texas, one in Nevada. Are you saying I'm saying she's either the angel of bad luck or she knows exactly what she's doing. A chill ran through me. "Can you get surveillance from the yacht?" "I've already got eyes on it. A guy I trust is posing as staff on the boat." "And Leona?" Jaden's been running his mouth. Something about the check clearing soon and how the timing worked out perfectly. I closed my eyes. "He thinks she's going to die." "He planned for her to die," Clarence corrected. "I just don't have proof of the push yet." I hung up, hands shaking but determined. I walked back to Tamara's room, looked at her face pale, peaceful, unaware. And suddenly, something in my gut whispered, "Check the phone." Tamara's cell phone had been placed in a drawer in the small cabinet by her bed. I pulled it out, cracked the passcode, her dog's name, Biscuit, and opened her texts. Most were between her and me. Then there were long, gushing messages to Jaden. Then, silence. A gap of 3 days before the accident. Then one message stood out. From Cassidy. "You sure you're ready? Once this starts, there's no going back." That was dated the night before Tamra fell. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Harper. My fingers moved faster than they had in years. My heart raced. I walked into the hallway, called Clarence again. "Got something," I said. "Cassidy messaged Tamara the night before the fall. Send it. Now." I did. A few minutes passed before Clarence called back. I traced Cassidy's phone. She was at Tamara's house the morning of the fall. No work records, no medical appointments. Nothing official. "She shouldn't have been there," I said, already pacing. "Tamara wasn't taking meds anymore." "That's your smoking gun. We just need to tie her to the scene." "I'll find a way," I said. "She's not going to get away with this." Back in the room, I sat down again and took Tamara's hand. "You trusted the wrong people," I whispered. "But you still have me." And I meant every word. Because no matter how broken this system was, no matter how many signatures or policies or secrets tried to trap her in silence, I was going to raise my voice louder than any of them. And I wasn't alone anymore. I had Clarence. I had Harper. I had the truth. And I had a mother's rage. The sun was already rising when I realized I hadn't slept. Hospital nights have a way of stretching time until hours lose meaning. The lights never dim completely. Footsteps echo down the hall at all hours, and grief sits in your chest like a second heart, heavy and relentless. Tamara was still unconscious when morning rounds began. The swelling in her brain hadn't worsened, which the doctors called cautiously encouraging. I clung to those words like a life raft, even though they felt thin and fragile. Encouraging didn't mean safe. It didn't mean healed. It just meant she was still here. And as long as she was still here, so was hope. I stepped out into the hallway to make room for the medical team and leaned against the wall, pressing my palm to my chest. My arm still bore the faint scar from the burn in my kitchen months ago. A thin, pale reminder of the day Tamara chose Jaden over my warning. I traced it absent-mindedly, the memory rising whether I invited it or not. People like to believe love is always gentle, that it softens edges, heals wounds, brings clarity, but I had learned the harder truth. Love, when mixed with fear and dependency, can make intelligent women abandon their own instincts. It can turn red flags into background noise. It can make a daughter push her own mother away. I remembered Tamra as a teenager, sitting at the kitchen table with college brochures spread out like a map of her future. She had always been careful, thoughtful, the kind of girl who read contracts before signing them. That was what frightened me most about Jaden. He didn't just deceive her, he dismantled her judgment piece by piece. Jaden never yelled. He didn't need to. He planted doubt instead. About herself, about me. "She doesn't trust you," he'd once told Tamara, loud enough for me to hear from the other room. "She wants control. You're too strong to let her run your life." And Tamara, desperate to prove she was grown, swallowed it whole. The nurse came out and nodded to me. "You can go back in." I returned to Tamara's bedside and sat, brushing her hair with my fingers like I used to when she was sick as a child. Her lashes rested softly against her cheeks. She looked peaceful, almost untouched by the violence that had brought her here. That illusion made my throat tighten. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not even sure who I was apologizing to. I should have pushed harder. I should have fought louder. My phone vibrated in my hand. A text from Clarence. "Got movement. Jaden left the marina around dawn, heading inland, not to the hospital." I stared at the message. Of course he wasn't coming. If he showed up here, he'd have to look doctors in the eye. He'd have to perform grief instead of indulgence. Men like Jaden preferred distance when consequences approached. Another message came through. "Cassidy's still on the yacht, acting nervous, drinking too fast." I exhaled slowly. "Good," I murmured. Nervous people make mistakes. The door opened again, and this time it was Harper. She wore a dark blazer over a simple blouse, her silver hair pulled back tightly. She looked like what she was, a woman who had spent decades navigating systems designed to exhaust people like me. "Lee," she said softly, pulling me into a brief hug. "How is she?" "Still with us," I replied. "For now." Harper nodded. "That's enough to keep going." We stepped into the corner of the room, lowering our voices. "I spoke to the hospital's legal department," Harper said. "If Jaden doesn't show up within the next few hours, we can petition for temporary medical guardianship based on abandonment." "Will that hold?" I asked. "It'll buy time, and time is everything." I nodded. Clarence found insurance policies, shell companies. Cassidy's been at the house before the fall. Harper's jaw tightened. "Then this isn't just negligence, it's conspiracy." The word settled between us like a verdict. "I want you to be prepared," she continued. "If Tamara wakes up and testifies, this becomes a criminal case. If she doesn't..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang. I straightened. "She will." Harper studied my face. "Lee, I know that look. You can't carry this alone." "I'm not," I said. "I'm carrying her." Harper squeezed my hand. "That's why you're dangerous." After she left to make calls, I sat back down and opened Tamara's phone again. I reread old messages, searching for patterns I'd missed. There were voice notes from Jaden filled with affection, promises, apologies, and then there were gaps days when he went silent, only to reappear with another idea, another need. One message caught my eye. It was from Tamara to a friend, dated 2 weeks before the fall. "I feel like I'm disappearing. Everything is about keeping him calm. If he's upset, it's my fault. If he's broke, it's my responsibility. Mom tried to warn me, and I hated her for it. Now I'm just tired." My vision blurred. She had known. On some level, she had known. I locked the phone and pressed it to my chest. A nurse came rushing in moments later. "Mrs. Williams," she said urgently, her blood pressure spiking. I stood instantly, heart hammering, watching the monitors as numbers climbed and alarms chirped. The medical team moved in with practiced speed, adjusting medications, murmuring instructions. "Talk to her," the nurse said quietly. "Sometimes they can hear you." I leaned down, my mouth near Tamara's ear. "Tammy, it's Mom. You're not alone. Don't let go. Not yet. There's so much you haven't said." Her fingers twitched. Just barely. But it was enough to make my knees weak. "Did you see that?" I asked, voice breaking. The nurse nodded. "Yes." Hope surged, fragile but alive. As the room settled again, I knew something with absolute certainty. Tamara was still fighting, and so was I. Jaden thought love made her weak. He thought it made me irrelevant. He was wrong on both counts. Because love didn't blind me anymore. It sharpened me, and the bill for his lies was coming due. The flutter of Tamara's fingers was small, so small it could have been dismissed as a reflex. But I knew my child. That tiny tremor wasn't nothing. It was a cry through the fog, a signal, a fight to come back. The nurse looked at me, then quickly checked her vitals. "Could be neurological activity increasing," she said, trying to sound neutral, but her eyes were wide. Hope had a way of slipping past professional detachment. "She moved," I whispered again, tears brimming. My baby moved. Tamara didn't wake up that morning, not fully, but her body began to stir more often, small shifts in muscle, flickers beneath her eyelids, a sigh-like breath taken on purpose. To a stranger, it might not have seemed like much, but to me, it was everything, and it terrified me, because now the clock was ticking. If she lived and God, I prayed she would, Jaden would know his plan had failed, and men like Jaden didn't take failure well, especially not when it cost them millions. That night, after Clarence updated me that Cassidy had booked a one-way flight to Miami under a fake name, I knew what I had to do. I had to confront him. It wasn't revenge, it was prevention. If Jaden knew we were watching, if he sensed the tide turning, maybe, just maybe, he'd panic. Panic made people sloppy. Sloppy made evidence, and evidence could bring justice. So I dressed in the only decent suit I'd packed, a navy pantsuit Curtis always liked on me, and called an Uber to take me to the marina. The air was thick with salt and humidity. The Amelia's Dream glowed in the dock like a floating theater, all polished teak and tinted windows. Laughter and music echoed from the upper deck. A security guard stepped forward as I approached the gangway. "I'm here to see Jaden Maxwell," I said calmly. "Private event," the guard replied. I didn't blink. "Tell him his mother-in-law is here, and if he doesn't come down, I'll start telling his guests what kind of man they're really drinking with." That got his attention. A few minutes later, Jaden appeared at the top of the gangway, glass of champagne in hand, wearing a crisp white linen shirt unbuttoned just low enough to show off the gold chain he thought made him look important. "Leona," he called out, smiling like we were old friends. "What a surprise!" He sauntered down the gangway, that lazy swagger I'd come to hate. "Shouldn't you be at the hospital?" "She moved," I said before he could open his mouth again. His smile twitched. "She moved?" he repeated, like it was a word he'd forgotten the meaning of. "Tamara," I clarified. "She's fighting, and I thought you should know because if she wakes up, she'll tell us everything." His jaw tightened, just for a second. "I don't know what you're insinuating." "I'm not insinuating," I interrupted. "I'm promising." He glanced around, making sure no one was watching, then stepped closer. "You should be careful, Leona," he said, voice low. "Grief makes people irrational. Say the wrong thing, and you could be the one in trouble." I smiled. "Then I guess it's a good thing I'm not grieving yet." We stood there, locked in a quiet war. "Cassidy's running," I added, like I was sharing gossip over coffee. "That's usually the sign of a guilty conscience, don't you think?" His eyes narrowed, but his face stayed composed. "She was your daughter's nurse," he said evenly. "You should be grateful she was there." "I would be," I said, stepping closer, "if Tamara had asked for her. But she didn't. And I have phone records, Jaden. I know Cassidy was in the house that morning. She had no reason to be there." He went pale for a flash, then recovered. "You're grasping." "No," I said, voice steady. "I'm preparing. You had the motive, you had access, and now you have a very big problem, because Tamara might wake up, and when she does, everything will come apart." I turned to leave, but paused. "Oh, and one more thing," I said over my shoulder. "If anything happens to me before this is over, Harper has copies of everything. Clarence, too. So think carefully before you try to silence me." I didn't wait for his reply. Back in the car, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. My hands were shaking, but underneath the fear was something stronger. Clarity. Jaden was scared. He hadn't expected a fight. He'd counted on Tamara staying silent either in death or disbelief. But now he had me, and he didn't know what to do with that. At the hospital, I found the night nurse checking vitals. She's more responsive, the nurse said quietly. Not fully conscious yet, but her brain activity is improving. I sat beside her, took her hand. You're almost back, I whispered. And when you are, we'll burn every lie down together. Tamara's lips parted, and a tiny breath escaped like the faintest echo of a sigh. She was coming back to me, and Jaden's time was running out. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital chair with a crick in my neck and hope in my chest. Tamara had stirred again. It wasn't just a twitch this time. Her eyelids fluttered open, briefly. Her fingers curled around mine for a second, just enough to let me know she wasn't gone, not yet. Her grip was weak, but it was real. And when I whispered her name, I saw something behind her half-closed eyes. Recognition. That single moment was enough to rip the lid off all the fear I'd been carrying for days. I cried quietly, pressing her fingers to my lips, whispering a prayer into her skin. And then I got to work. Harper arrived shortly after sunrise, looking like she hadn't slept either. She carried a leather folder tucked under her arm, the corners already worn from handling. "We've got leverage," she said without waiting for small talk. "The hospital has agreed to proceed with temporary guardianship." I filed the motion. "You'll be signing paperwork within the hour." "Jaden won't like that," I said softly, glancing toward Tamara's room. Harper raised an eyebrow. "He doesn't have to like it. It's legal. He abandoned his responsibilities." "That makes our case airtight for now," I nodded. "I need more than legal. I need the truth out in the open." "That's what Clarence is for," she said. Speaking of he called, he's got something big. My stomach tightened. 2 hours later, I met Clarence at his office above a strip mall off Crenshaw. It was an old building, the kind that still had popcorn ceilings and a buzzer instead of a front desk. But Clarence had always preferred substance over flash. He handed me a manila envelope as soon as I walked in. "Surveillance footage," he said. "From the yacht. My guy was wired." I opened it slowly, fingers trembling, and stared at the series of stills. Jaden leaning over Cassidy, whispering into her ear. Jaden laughing as he tapped his phone, showing her something. And the last one, Cassidy holding a piece of paper that looked a whole lot like a check. "Time-stamped 2 hours after Tamara was brought in," Clarence said. He wasn't mourning. He was celebrating. "And Cassidy?" I asked. "She left the yacht later that night. But here's the twist, she wasn't alone. Security footage shows her handing off an envelope to a man in a gray hoodie. Who? Working on it. But guess where he went? Where? Insurance firm. Same one that handled Tamara's policy, 10 minutes before it closed. I pressed my fingers against my temple. "They're laundering the paperwork. Trying to cover tracks," he agreed, "but not well." Cassidy's flight was scheduled for tomorrow. My contact at TSA flagged her name from our tip. She's being held for questioning as we speak. I stood there in the center of Clarence's office, clutching photos of my daughter's husband celebrating her death with champagne and whispers. For a second, all I could do was breathe. "Do you think he'll run?" I asked. Clarence shook his head. "Not yet. He still thinks he's in control. He thinks Tamara won't wake up." "But she will," I said, my voice quiet but sure. Clarence leaned against his desk. "Then we're one step away from a confession." That evening, I returned to the hospital and slipped into Tamara's room with the envelope tucked into my bag. Her eyes opened slowly when I sat down, just barely, and this time they stayed open. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then, slowly, like a child waking from a long nap, she looked at me and tried to speak. "Shh," I whispered, leaning close. "Don't talk yet." She shook her head gently, lips parting. "Jay!" My heart nearly stopped. "You don't have to say it," I whispered, tears welling up again. "I know," but she kept trying. "Cassidy," she rasped, almost inaudible. I nodded. "We've got her, baby. She's not getting away." Tamara's hand found mine again, and this time the grip was firmer. Her breathing steadied, and I saw the fire faint but real return to her eyes. "You just focus on healing," I told her. "I'll handle everything else." The next day, Clarence called again. "Lee," he said, voice tight with excitement. "We've got it." "What?" Cassidy flipped. "She's talking. Said she didn't know the whole plan. Thought they were just draining bank accounts. But when Tamara got hurt when she fell, Jaden told her it was time to cash in. Called it a tragic windfall." I clenched the phone so hard it creaked. "Did she name him directly?" She signed a sworn statement. And we got the call logs. He called her from Tamara's house minutes after the 911 call. Told her, "It's done." I closed my eyes, mouth trembling. Then we go to the police. Already on it, they're building the arrest warrant. I hung up and turned to look at Tamara, who was asleep again, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with the machine beside her. I pressed my hand to the glass window and whispered, "It's almost over." 2 hours later, I stood in the hallway of the hospital as 2 detectives approached Jaden Maxwell in his designer loafers and Rolex watch. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He didn't protest. He just looked confused, as if the world he'd built out of lies and schemes was supposed to be permanent. He was cuffed and escorted out, and I followed silently behind, holding the envelope with every lie he thought he buried. Back in Tamara's room, I sat down again and took her hand. "It's done," I whispered. "He won't hurt you anymore." She squeezed back. That squeeze was more than comfort. It was victory. The news spread fast, too fast for comfort. Within hours of Jaden's arrest, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old family friends, neighbors, even church acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone suddenly had something to say, some in shock, some in whispered, "I always knew something was off," and some, disturbingly, in denial. "Are you sure he did it, Leona?" One woman from my Bible study group asked. "He always seemed so loving, so attentive." I almost laughed. Attentive like a vulture, but I didn't waste energy defending the truth. The truth had hands now, documents, footage, Cassidy's signed statement, and the growing list of financial fraud uncovered by Clarence and Harper. Jaden hadn't just plotted a murder, he'd spent the past 2 years siphoning Tamara's life dry while smiling through every family dinner. And somehow, I had to explain that to my daughter without shattering her further. Tamara was awake, truly awake. By the 3rd day after Jaden's arrest, the swelling had gone down enough to reduce her sedation, and her body responded better than expected. She could sit up with help. Her voice was still hoarse, like it was remembering how to exist. But her spirit, that spark I feared was lost, was still there, dimmed, cautious, but alive. The doctor had just left when I came in with a fresh cup of tea. I'd added a little honey and a dash of cinnamon, just like she used to like it when she had the flu as a teenager. Her eyes followed me as I entered. "Is it true?" she whispered. I froze, halfway through setting the cup down. She continued, "Is Jaden really in jail?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. He was arrested 2 nights ago. There's evidence. Witnesses," Cassidy confessed. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She stared ahead, breathing slowly, methodically. "I trusted him," she said after a long pause. "I know," I whispered. "I defended him. I gave him everything." "You loved him," I said gently, "and you believed that love made him good." Her lip trembled. Was I stupid? No. I reached out and took her hand. "You were hopeful. There's nothing foolish about hope." She looked at me for a long time, as if trying to decide whether to believe that. Then her gaze drifted to the window. "He told me he was investing in something for us. A future. That's why he needed the money." "I know," I said, "and I tried to warn you, but it wasn't your fault you wanted to believe him." A tear finally slipped down her cheek. "He said you hated him because you didn't want me to grow up." I didn't flinch. "He knew exactly how to separate us. That's what men like him do." She closed her eyes. "I hurt you." "You did," I admitted, voice cracking. "That day in the kitchen, when you pulled away from me and I fell, when the water burned me, you looked at me like I was the enemy. I didn't mean—" "I know you didn't," I interrupted. "You were scared, angry, but I wasn't trying to control you. I was trying to protect you, and I'd do it again." Silence fell over the room, but it wasn't cold. It was heavy with truth. "I wanted him to be someone he wasn't," Tamara said quietly. "I know. I needed him to be. And now you don't," I said, squeezing her hand. "Now, you just need to heal." She exhaled, shaky but steady. "How much did he take?" "Almost everything." Her face fell. "But we'll rebuild," I added, "together." She looked at me, and this time there was no doubt in her eyes, just grief and trust. "I don't know who I am without him." "You're still you," I said, "and you were always more than who he saw." The rest of the day passed slowly. Tamara slept on and off, and I stayed by her side, knitting in silence, sometimes reading old letters out loud, sometimes just humming the songs my mother used to sing to me, songs about surviving storms. That night, Clarence called with another update. "We found the house," he said. "What house?" "The one Jaden bought in Nevada, under a different name. Vacation property. Turns out Cassidy had a key. They'd been using it for months." I rubbed my temple. What were they planning? Escape, maybe. Or a second life, once Tamara was gone. I swallowed the bile that rose in my throat. "Tamara's strong," Clarence added. "She's going to make it, and when she does, this case will bury Jaden." "I don't want to bury him," I said, tired to my bones. "I want to forget him." But I knew that wasn't possible. Not yet. Because Tamara still had to testify. And court was coming. The next morning, I found her sitting upright, staring at a framed photo of her and Jaden from their engagement party. It had been taken in our backyard, under fairy lights and late summer stars. Her smile in that photo had broken my heart then, because I saw how much she believed in the man next to her. Now, she looked at it like a stranger. "I want to be there," she said. I frowned. "Where?" "In court. When they say it out loud." "What he did." I nodded slowly. "It'll be hard." "I don't want it to be easy," she said, steel entering her voice. "I want it to be true." That was the moment I knew. Tamara wasn't just surviving. She was returning. And this time, she would speak not from the illusion of love, but from the power of truth. By the time the court summons arrived, Tamara had already made up her mind. She would testify. The DA was hesitant. "Her condition is still fragile," he warned over the phone, the same way one might caution someone balancing porcelain on the edge of a cliff. "We can submit her statement without her presence. Spare her the pressure." But Tamara was clear. She didn't want to be spared. She wanted to stand. "It wasn't just my life he tried to end," she said as I adjusted her scarf in the mirror that morning. "It was my voice. He wanted me erased, quiet, like a mistake." I cupped her face in my hands. "Then you go speak, baby." Loud enough that it echoes through every lie he ever told. Courtroom 2B was cold, sterile, and brighter than it needed to be. The fluorescent lights gave everyone a washed-out pallor, like they were ghosts instead of people. But Tamara, in a navy blue blouse and tailored slacks, looked solid, whole, a little pale, a little thinner, but present, breathing, alive, and so much more than he had expected. Jaden sat at the defense table with a lawyer, straight from Central Casting. Slick suit, hollow smile. He didn't meet Tamara's gaze when she was wheeled in. Cowardice always has a way of hiding behind expensive lapels. Cassidy, seated in the gallery under federal protection, looked like a cracked vase, glued together, poorly fragile, twitchy, ashamed. She had given her full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. It hadn't absolved her, not in my eyes. But at least it had tipped the scales. The prosecution laid out its case with brutal precision: motive, financial records, insurance policies, forensic analysis of the staircase, Tamara's phone records, Cassidy's statement, surveillance footage, Jaden's digital paper trail, sloppily erased and easily retrieved, and finally Tamara's voice. She was called to the stand on the second day. I held my breath as she walked, with assistance to the front. The room seemed to pause as she turned and took her seat, spine straight, hands trembling only slightly as she was sworn in. "State your name," the prosecutor said. "Tamara Grace Maxwell." "Do you know the defendant?" She turned slowly, looked straight at Jaden and said, "He's my husband." Gasps fluttered through the gallery, even though everyone already knew it. "Can you tell the court what happened the morning of July 6th? Tamara took a breath. "We had an argument. I told him I wanted to separate. I had found discrepancies in our finances. I suspected he was hiding money. He told me I was paranoid, that I was trying to destroy him. Then he left the room." Her voice trembled now, but she pressed forward. "I went upstairs to call my mother. That's when I saw Cassidy standing in the hallway. She wasn't supposed to be there. Jaden had told me she was just a friend, but she had a key." "And what happened next?" "I don't remember the fall, but I remember a hand on my back. I remember fear. Silence. I woke up in the hospital, and I remember my mother's face. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. I'd been betrayed. Jaden's lawyer tried to cross-examine, but every question landed like a broken arrow. Tamara answered with composure. She didn't dramatize. She didn't exaggerate. She simply told the truth. And that truth wrapped around Jaden like a noose. Outside the courtroom, reporters buzzed like flies around old fruit. Microphones thrust. Cameras clicked. But Tamara kept her eyes forward, leaning against my arm as we made our way down the steps. "You did it," I whispered. She nodded, the weight of everything pressing down at once. I never thought I'd get to say any of that out loud. "You didn't just say it," I said. You burned the silence down. A week later, Jaden was convicted on all counts: attempted murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy. The sentence would come later, but the verdict was enough. The look on his face when the words guilty echoed through the courtroom was the only closure I would ever need. But for Tamara, closure wasn't a moment, it was a journey. We returned home to a different house, not because the walls had changed, but because there were still ghosts in the corners, memories of laughter that wasn't real, dinners that tasted like denial, kisses that masked control. But she refused to be haunted. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen organizing spices, something so ordinary it nearly made me cry. She looked up, smiled faintly. "I threw out the mug he used," she said, "the one that said boss. He bought it for himself." I smiled. "Good riddance." She turned serious. "I want to start therapy, not just for recovery, but to understand how I let it get that far." "That's strength," I said, "not weakness." She hesitated, then added, "I think I want to volunteer. Women's shelters, crisis centers. I know what it feels like now, to not be believed." I walked over, placed my hand over hers. "Then you help them believe in themselves." That night, over warm peach cobbler and tea, we talked about the future, not the past, not Jaden, not the trial, just what came next. The courtroom was behind us, but justice? Justice was in everything we built from that day forward. Fall settled over the city like a balm. The heat of summer had finally lifted, and with it, a weight in my chest I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The air smelled like wood smoke and turning leaves, and for the first time in months, the breeze through my kitchen window didn't feel like it was sneaking in to deliver bad news. It just felt clean. Tamara had been home for 2 weeks. The bruises were fading, the stitches dissolved, the scar on her scalp hidden by new growth of hair. Her limp was noticeable if you were watching for it, but most people wouldn't. I did. I watched her like the moon watched the ocean, constant, protective, quietly measuring every ripple of pain beneath the surface. She never complained. That scared me more than any limp. "Mom?" she called from the living room. "Where's the recipe for your apple bread?" "In the green binder, pantry shelf second from the top." She laughed, just a little. "Why is everything always in the most inconvenient spot?" "Because I like to make life hard for anyone trying to steal my secrets," I called back. It was a small thing, her baking, but it mattered. She hadn't cooked in almost a year. Jaden had insisted on controlling the kitchen. He said it was about helping her focus on work, but I knew now it was about erasing her agency, one comfort at a time. Today, she was reclaiming one of them. I sipped tea at the table and watched her peel apples with surgical precision. Her movements were slow but sure, her fingers steadier than they'd been since she came home. There was something sacred about watching her reclaim her rituals. "Clarence called," I said casually. "He wants to come by tomorrow. Said he has something to give you." She paused, turning over an apple in her hand. "What is it?" He wouldn't say. Tamara nodded, wiped her hands, and leaned against the counter. "Has he found more evidence?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he just wants to say goodbye. The case is closed, Tammy. Jaden's sentencing is next week, but everything else is wrapped." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "It doesn't feel over." "I know," I replied. "Because he took pieces of you you're still learning to name. But he can't take who you are. That part's coming back." She gave me a small smile, then went back to chopping. The next morning, Clarence arrived just after 10. He wore his usual jeans, a blazer that had seen better days, and eyes that had seen far worse. He hugged me at the door, then walked straight to Tamara, holding out a small wooden box. "This," he said, "was in Jaden's safe. We had to get a court order to crack it. It was hidden beneath tax documents and old receipts." Tamara opened it slowly. Inside was a small velvet pouch, a flash drive, and a handwritten note. She unfolded the note, frowning. Then her face changed, paled. "What is it?" I asked. "It's from him," she whispered. "From Jaden. Dated before the fall." Clarence took a step closer. "You don't have to read it out loud." She shook her head. "No, I want to." She began, voice steady. "Tamara, if you're reading this, it means something didn't go as planned. Maybe Cassidy talked. Maybe you survived. Maybe your mother dug where she wasn't supposed to. I never meant for you to get hurt. Not like that. But you have to understand. I was drowning. The debts, the pressure, it was crushing me. You were my way out. You were supposed to be my salvation. But love wasn't enough. I did what I had to do. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to understand that this wasn't personal. It was survival. Tamara's hands shook as she lowered the letter. I felt my stomach turn, but she said nothing. "People like him," Clarence said quietly. "They always think survival is a reason to betray, like it's noble somehow." Tamara stared at the letter a moment longer, then dropped it back in the box. "I'd like to burn it," she said simply. And so we did. That afternoon, we went into the backyard, lit a small metal tin with some dried leaves, and dropped the letter in. It curled and blackened, words dissolving into smoke. As the last of it turned to ash, Tamara turned to me. "Do you think I'll ever trust myself again?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, because you already are." Later, she asked me if I'd go with her to Jaden's sentencing. "I don't want to speak," she said. "I just want to be there. I want to hear it when someone says it out loud what he did and what it cost." So we dressed in muted colors, sat in the second row, and listened as the judge handed down a sentence of 25 years without parole. Jaden didn't look at us. Not once. When the gavel fell, Tamara exhaled, slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for years. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool. Tamara leaned her head on my shoulder. "It's not justice," she said. "Not really." "No," I agreed. "But it's something." "And what do I do now?" she asked. "You live," I said. "You build. You bake apple bread. You tell your story to women who need to hear it. You keep waking up." And she nodded, because she knew. The real sentence, the real reckoning, wasn't inside those walls where Jaden now sat. It was in every morning she chose to rise, every scar she chose to wear without shame, and every time she spoke when silence once held her hostage. Tamara's name was never in the headlines the way Jaden's was. The news ran with his story, the charming entrepreneur with a dark double life, the perfect husband accused of plotting the perfect crime. His mugshot, his trial footage, even clips from our old holiday parties, everything splashed across morning shows and true crime segments. But Tamara? She was a footnote, and in a strange, bittersweet way, she preferred it that way. Still, the silence had grown too familiar. Too many women had reached out, strangers, friends of friends, even former classmates sharing stories they'd never told anyone. Some had never even said it out loud until they wrote her. "I read about you," one email said. "You gave me courage." That, more than any verdict, had power. So on a brisk November afternoon, Tamara did something she never thought she'd do again. She spoke. It was at a small community center tucked between a library and a laundromat on the east side of the city. The kind of place that smelled like coffee and worn books, where folding chairs creaked and water coolers gurgled in the background. There was no stage, no lights, just a circle of women and a microphone that barely worked. Harper was there. Clarence, too, standing in the back like a quiet sentinel. And me, front row, hands clenched together in my lap. Tamara stood slowly when it was her turn, her limp still present but smaller, somehow less defining. "My name is Tamara," she began, voice soft but clear, and for a long time I thought silence kept me safe. She looked around the room. No one moved. I thought if I didn't speak about the things that felt wrong, they might disappear. I thought if I made myself small enough, agreeable enough, I could avoid breaking the image everyone had of us, the perfect couple, the successful marriage. A murmur of understanding moved through the room like wind. "But silence didn't keep me safe," she continued. "It kept me trapped. And when I finally started asking questions about money, about his stories he didn't answer. He planned, and I nearly died because of it. She paused, letting that sit heavy. A woman near the back wiped a tear. But I survived. Not because I was stronger, not because I was lucky. I survived because someone refused to stop loving me, even when I didn't love myself. She looked at me then, her eyes glistening. And now I speak, for the women who didn't get to, for the ones who can't yet, for the ones who are still convinced it's their fault. She sat down to a wave of quiet, reverent applause. Afterward, the women formed a line not to ask questions, but to thank her, to hug her, to whisper pieces of their own stories into her ear. And Tamara listened, not as a victim, as a survivor. As we walked back to the car, the street lamps flickering on one by one, she turned to me. "I thought the courtroom was where I'd feel free," she said. "But it's here, with them, telling the truth." I smiled, "Then keep telling it." That night, over dinner, she brought up something I hadn't expected. "Do you remember the house on Fairview Lane?" she asked. "The yellow one with the ivy?" "Yes, you always said if you ever hit the lottery, that'd be the house you'd buy." I chuckled. "It had a porch swing and a big oak tree. What's not to love?" Tamara hesitated. "I'm thinking of buying it." I froze. "That house is expensive." "I've been working again," she said. "Freelancing, some consulting. I also got a settlement from the insurance company. They admitted fault in approving a fraudulent claim. It's not millions, but it's enough. I want to start fresh." I put my fork down. "You don't have to start over with stuff, Tammy. You're already doing the work." She reached across the table, took my hand. "It's not about the house, Mom. It's about planting something new, something that's mine." I blinked away tears. "Then let me help you paint the porch swing." We visited the house the next week. It was smaller than I remembered, and the ivy was mostly gone. But the oak tree was still there, tall and protective, branches swaying gently in the cold wind. Tamara walked through every room like she was memorizing it. She paused at each window, let the sunlight hit her face, and when we reached the back patio, she looked out over the little garden. "Do you think I can grow something here?" she asked. I looked at her, her chin lifted toward the sky. "You already are," I said. As winter crept closer, we moved her in. Room by room, no rush, no pressure, just progress. Every book placed on the shelf, every blanket folded at the foot of the bed, it was all part of her rebuilding, her resurrection. And as we sat by the fireplace one evening, sipping cider, she said something I'll never forget. "You saved my life, Mom." I shook my head. "No, baby, I just kept the light on. You found the way out. Because sometimes, survival isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, like a woman peeling apples again. Or standing at a microphone. Or planting something in the cold soil and trusting it will bloom again." The yellow house on Fairview Lane became more than just a new address. It became a quiet sanctuary, a place to set down the ghosts and pick up the tools to build again. Tamara called it the after. "I lived through before," she said once while unpacking her winter coats. "Now I get to choose what after looks like." Every corner of that home carried a choice. The kitchen had open shelving because she wanted to see every dish, no more hidden things. The living room had no television for now, just soft light and books and quiet music. In the bedroom, she chose warm, earthy tones, safe colors, she called them. I visited every afternoon like clockwork. Some days I brought soup or fresh laundry, other days just myself. Tamara never asked for much, but I knew the power of simply showing up. That week, we had our first real snow, just a dusting, but enough to turn the roof white and coat the oak tree in soft frost. Tamara stood at the window with her mug and whispered, "He never saw me like this." I looked up from the afghan I was folding. "How?" Still, unafraid, not waiting for him to come through the door and change the weather. She didn't say it bitterly. It was just fact. The next day, Clarence called again. He'd been quiet since the sentencing, giving Tamara space, but he'd been working, always working. "Tell her I found the charity," he said over the phone. "What charity?" "The one Jaden set up offshore, supposedly for youth programs. It was just a shell, but there's still money in the account." I stiffened. "How much?" "Enough to matter, enough to do good if she wants it." That night, I told Tamara over dinner. She didn't react right away, just kept spooning soup into her bowl. Then she asked, "Could we repurpose it? Set it up right this time? You'd want to carry his name? No, she said firmly. I'd rename it. Rewrite the story. Use it to help women like me. Like Cassidy, even if I can't forgive her. She was used, too. She didn't ask for permission. She just made a plan. The new foundation launched 6 weeks later. It was small, local, and quiet. No big press release. Just a few flyers at shelters, a website, and a phone number that rang directly to a counselor. Tamara called it the After Project. She didn't want to be the face. Too soon, she said. Too raw. But she funded the first 6 months herself and met with survivors behind the scenes, listening, advising, sometimes just sitting in the silence with them. The first woman they helped was named Gloria. She came to one of the meetings late, face hidden behind sunglasses and a scarf, but her voice when she spoke was steady. I was with him for 20 years. He never hit me. He just made me small. Tamara looked at her, eyes full. That's the worst part, she said. The shrinking. They talked for an hour. After Gloria left, Tamara didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, "This is what healing feels like. Not mine, ours." As winter thawed into spring, the yellow house changed too. The porch swing was installed. New curtains were sewn. Tamara planted herbs on the windowsill and named them like pets: rosemary, basil, minty. And then, one morning, she did something that surprised even me. She put on her old engagement ring. Not to wear, to bury. We walked out beneath the oak tree together. She dug a small hole in the soft, damp soil, kissed the ring one last time, and placed it in the earth. For what I hoped it was, she said, and for what it wasn't. Then she covered it, pressed the soil down flat, and stood up straighter than I'd seen her in months. "What will you plant over it?" I asked. She smiled. "Something wild, something with thorns, something that blooms anyway." That night, she hosted a dinner. Just 6 people, me, Harper, Clarence, Gloria, and 2 other women from the center. She made roast chicken, lemon potatoes, and her signature apple bread. We sat around her kitchen table laughing at nothing and everything. The kind of laughter that comes when you're finally light again. At the end of the meal, she raised her glass. "To the after," she said, her voice ringing clear. And we toasted. Because healing isn't a straight line. It isn't a courtroom victory or a press headline. It's found in dirt under your nails, in the warmth of a shared meal, in the way your voice stops shaking when you say your own name. And Tamara was finally saying hers again. By late spring, the house on Fairview Lane didn't just feel like home, it smelled like it. Cinnamon from the apple bread she baked on Sundays, lemongrass from the soap she loved, and soil real, living soil tracking in from her garden where something finally began to bloom above Jaden's buried ring. It was a red peony. "I didn't even plant that," Tamara said, crouching beside it one morning, her fingers grazing the velvet petals. "Maybe the earth did," I said. "Maybe it knew you needed something beautiful to grow out of all that pain." She smiled, but there was something else behind her eyes. Not sadness, more like anticipation, like a thought she hadn't said aloud yet. That afternoon, she invited me to walk with her around the neighborhood. We hadn't done that in years. We passed by the small bookstore where she bought her first journal after the fall, the corner cafe that now had her favorite table near the window reserved every Friday, and the park bench she sat on with Gloria the week before, when they talked about making the After Project mobile, bringing services directly to women who couldn't leave their homes. But when we reached the intersection near the school playground, Tamara stopped and stared across the street. A group of kids were laughing, chasing each other in circles. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, had the same messy curls Tamara once wore at that age. She watched silently. Then finally, she spoke. "I lost time," she said. "So much of it. I wanted children, a family. Jaden kept pushing it back, said we weren't ready, said we needed more money, more status. What he meant was he wasn't ready to let me be something he couldn't control." I didn't interrupt. I still want that," she continued. "I don't know how, or when, or even if it'll happen, but I want to try." It was the first time she'd said it out loud. I took her hand. "There's still time, baby." And we stood there, watching the playground, letting the sun fall on our faces like it used to when she was a girl on that very same street. The following week, Harper called with a proposition. "I've been asked to speak at a law school panel about victim advocacy. They want a survivor to come too, someone who's lived it. Tamara came to mind. I brought it up over dinner. Tamara stirred her soup thoughtfully. I'm not a public speaker, she said. You don't have to be, I replied. Just be you. That's enough. 2 days later, she stood in front of 70 law students in a crisp navy dress, hair pulled back simply, no makeup except the soft sheen of confidence. She told them the story not as a victim but as a woman who had reclaimed her name, her body, her voice. She told them what it felt like to love someone who smiled while building your coffin. She told them about the fall, the lies, the silence, and then the light. When she finished, no one clapped at first. They were too stunned. Then slowly, one by one, the room filled with a standing ovation. Clarence, seated near the back, wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. Even Harper looked shaken. Afterward, a young woman approached Tamara and whispered something into her ear. Tamara nodded, pulled the girl into a hug, and held her longer than words would have allowed. On the drive home, she said quietly, that wasn't just for them, that was for me. You're not just healing, I said. You're becoming. The next morning, Tamara found a letter on her porch. No return address, just her name, handwritten carefully. Inside was a photo, her and Jaden on their wedding day. It had been torn down the middle. Her half remained, his was missing. Beneath it, a sticky note with 2 words, "You survived." She never found out who sent it, but she placed it in a frame beside her bed, not as a trophy but as a reminder. That survival wasn't shameful. It was sacred. And as the foundation grew, and women began to write their own chapters, some loud, some whispered, Tamara remained at the center, not as a symbol, but as proof that even the deepest betrayal can be followed by a second beginning. The room that used to be a guest room had slowly evolved. At first, it held boxes files from Jaden's trial, letters from women Tamara had met through the After Project, copies of restraining orders and court transcripts, things she couldn't yet let go of. But now, it had light. She'd painted the walls a soft sage green, not to forget but to soothe. There was a reading chair in the corner, a woven blanket folded neatly over its back. A single orchid sat on the windowsill, its white petals opening toward the morning sun. It's my east-facing room, she said when I visited, because every day the light hits it first. She'd started writing again, not for anyone else, just for herself. Journals full of questions, prayers, rage, gratitude. She didn't try to tie it up in a bow anymore. She just let the truth exist. You know, she told me over coffee one morning, for a long time I thought I had to be either angry or grateful, but I'm both, and I think that's okay. It's more than okay, I said. It's honest. One afternoon, she received a letter forwarded through the center. It was from Cassidy. Tamara hesitated before opening it. The paper trembled in her hands, not from fear, but from something deeper, the ache of unfinished wounds. She read it slowly, lips tightening as she went. When she finished, she handed it to me. Tamara, there is no excuse for what I did. No explanation that would make it less horrific. I've told my truth to the courts, but you're the one I wronged most. I believed him. I believed he loved me. I believed he was the victim. And I chose to be blind to your suffering? I am not asking for forgiveness. I would not know how to accept it if you gave it. I just want you to know that your survival freed me too. Watching you rise after everything made me see what strength really is. I hope you continue to build the world he tried to steal from you. Cassidy Wan. Tamara didn't say anything for a while. Then she folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer in her east-facing room, and said, "Some people live with shame. Some people use it. I'm not carrying hers." The days grew longer. The peony bloomed again. And then came a phone call that shifted something none of us had prepared for. It was from Tamara's old friend, Marcus, someone we hadn't seen since before Jaden. He'd always been gentle, soft-spoken, a bit of a bookworm. He had moved to Chicago years ago for work, but had apparently been following Tamara's story from afar. "I'd like to visit," he said, "if that's okay." Tamara didn't answer right away. After everything, even kindness felt suspect. But then she looked at me and said, "I think it's time I stop waiting for the next blow." When Marcus arrived that weekend, I stayed discreetly upstairs, but I listened, of course I did. A mother never stops listening for the tremble in her child's voice. What I heard instead was laughter, soft, tentative, but real. They sat on the back porch until sundown, talking about books, childhood memories, and the little lives people live in the cracks between the big, messy moments. Later, Tamara came into the kitchen where I was pretending not to eavesdrop. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, smiling just slightly. "I forgot what it feels like to be seen without being studied," she said. I turned to her. And I think I'd like to see what it feels like to just be me. No backstory, no caveats. "That's still you," I said gently. "But maybe now there's room for joy too." Over the following weeks, Marcus became a quiet presence. He never pushed, never asked for more than Tamara was willing to offer. He helped paint the fence, built a bookshelf in the reading room, brought coffee every Wednesday morning just because. And Tamara? She began to breathe differently. One evening, as we were cleaning up dinner dishes, she said, "I thought I'd never feel anything close to love again, but maybe I don't have to feel it the same way I did before." "No," I said, drying a plate. "You feel it wiser now, and safer." There was no fairy tale, no sweeping declarations, just steady, earned peace. And sometimes that's the happiest ending of all. Tamara stood by her east-facing window the next morning, watching the sunrise as she always did. But this time, she was holding something new in her hand, a copy of her first public essay. It was titled, "What Grew After the Fall?" And it ended with a line that made me weep when I read it. "I am not the woman who fell. I am the woman who rose and planted something beautiful where the pain once lived." It was a Tuesday when the email came. Tamara had submitted her essay, "What Grew After the Fall?" to a mid-sized publication focused on women's stories. She hadn't expected much, maybe a thank you, a polite rejection. Instead, the subject line read, "We'd be honored to publish your piece." She read it 3 times before calling me. "Mom," she said, breathless, "they want to print it, in full, with my name." I was at the grocery store, halfway between the cereal aisle and the dairy case, and I nearly dropped a carton of eggs. "That's wonderful, baby." "They said they'll run it next month," she said, quieter now. "March. That's the month I fell." My hand tightened around the cart handle. "Then it's only right that your voice rises in the same month your world nearly ended." She didn't speak for a second, and then I heard her whisper, "Yeah, I like that." We celebrated with peach cobbler and old Motown records, dancing barefoot in her kitchen like we used to when she was little. It wasn't about the publication. It was about what it meant, to be heard, to be seen, to reclaim what had once been stolen with one push down a staircase. The next day, she received another letter, this time from the insurance company. After months of court proceedings and internal reviews, they had decided to offer a public apology and a full refund of the payout Jaden had claimed fraudulently. They wanted to avoid a lawsuit, of course, but they also wanted to correct the error. Tamara read the letter once, then said, "We'll use it for the mobile unit." The after project was growing faster than we'd expected. Requests were coming in from shelters, churches, even police departments asking for workshops. Survivors wanted to learn about their rights, about financial independence, about the signs of coercive control. Tamara refused to center herself in any of it. "This isn't my movement," she said. "It's theirs." But every woman who came through those meetings looked at her like she was something sacred, not because she was perfect, but because she was proof. Proof that you could survive a nightmare and write the ending yourself. Then came the school visit. A local high school counselor reached out after reading Tamara's essay online. She wanted Tamara to speak to a group of senior girls during Women's History Month. Tamara hesitated. "They're too young. What if it scares them? What if it prepares them?" I said. So she went. The auditorium was quiet as she stepped up to the mic. The girls sat in rows, all long limbs and wary eyes. The kind of youth that thinks they're invincible until someone shows them what vulnerability really looks like. Tamara didn't dramatize. She told the truth. About manipulation, about isolation, about the way love can twist if you don't hold it in the light. When she finished, a girl in the back raised her hand. "How do you know if it's abuse if there's no hitting?" Tamara looked her straight in the eye. "Because it makes you small. It makes you question your worth. It makes you feel like everything's your fault. Love shouldn't shrink you." The auditorium went still. Another girl asked, "Did you ever think you'd trust again?" Tamara smiled, just slightly. "Every morning I wake up and trust myself. That's where it starts." Afterward, a few students approached her. One handed her a note folded in quarters. It simply said, "Thank you for saying it. I haven't told anyone yet." Tamara slipped it into her journal that night, between pages filled with inked truths and tentative hope. Spring deepened. The peony bloomed again, wider this time, fuller. Tamara added a second chair to the porch swing. Sometimes Marcus sat beside her. Sometimes I did. Sometimes it was just empty, waiting for whoever needed it most that day. One Sunday we were sitting there after supper when she turned to me and said, "I want to teach again." My heart leapt. "You do?" "Not full-time. Maybe community college. Or adult literacy. I want to use the pieces of me that survived, not just the pain, the joy, too." I nodded, blinking fast. "You'd be amazing." She smiled. "I want to remind people that healing isn't just about fixing what broke. It's about rediscovering what we thought we lost." And she was right. Because in her, I saw things return I thought had vanished forever. Her laugh, not tight or cautious but full. Her rhythm, her confidence, her sense of humor. Even the way she danced while folding laundry, carefree, barefoot, offbeat, things I thought I'd lost. But love has a way of returning when you least expect it. In a look, in a note, in a room that faces east. It had been a year. One full circle of seasons since I first stood at that hospital bed, holding Tamara's cold, unmoving hand, begging the universe not to take her. We didn't mark the date with a party or ceremony. Tamara didn't want candles or speeches. Instead, she asked me to take a walk with her, just the two of us, down the street where she'd first learned to ride a bike. I remember that street so well. The sidewalk still had the crack near the third driveway, the one she'd tripped on at age 6. She scraped her chin and came home crying. I made her a grilled cheese sandwich and told her something I hadn't realized would become a theme of her life. You're allowed to fall. What matters is that you get up. Now here we were, a mother and her daughter, not walking for exercise or errands, but for memory, for reclamation. Tamara wore a pale blue windbreaker, zipped up to her neck. Her hands were in her pockets, but she moved with steady purpose. Her limp was barely noticeable now. If you didn't know her story, you might think she was just taking a casual stroll. But I knew better. Every step was layered with history, with pain, with defiance. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gotten there in time?" she asked. I stopped walking. Every mother knows that question, and every mother dreads the answer. "I do," I said. But then I stop, because I did get there, and you're here. That's the only version of the story I let myself live in. She nodded slowly. "I think I'm ready for the next thing." "What does that look like?" "Going back to school, teaching again, maybe even moving past the after project." I turned to her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Not leaving it," she explained, "but letting it run without me, letting it be bigger than my name, my story." My heart filled with pride and a little ache. "I think that's the bravest thing you've ever said," I told her. That night, she wrote an email to the board of the After Project, outlining her plan to step back from daily operations by year's end. She offered to remain involved as a mentor and fundraiser, but she wanted new voices to shape its direction. The reply came fast. They understood, and they supported her. Especially Gloria, who had grown into a natural leader. "You gave us the keys," she wrote. "Now let us drive." With that decision came space. Tamara used it well. She signed up for evening courses in adult education at the community college. She volunteered on weekends with a neighborhood tutoring program. And most importantly, she started attending therapy again, this time not for crisis, but for growth. "It's like cleaning a house after the storm's already passed," she explained. "Now I get to dust the corners." One Sunday afternoon, Marcus came by with a picnic basket. He didn't say where they were going, just smiled and said, "Trust me." When they returned, Tamara was glowing. "He took me to the Arboretum," she told me. "We sat by the water and didn't talk about trauma, or healing, or Jaden. We just talked about favorite poems and bad 90s sitcoms." I grinned. "Sounds like love." She shook her head playfully. "It sounds like peace, but even peace comes with choices." That evening, Tamara came into the kitchen while I was rinsing dishes. "I want you to know something," she said. "If I ever fall in love again, really love, I'll be okay. But I'll never lose myself again, no matter how deep it goes. I dried my hands and turned to her. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Summer arrived softly that year. The heat was gentle, the nights full of lightning bugs and jazz playing from open windows. Tamra planted lavender beside the peony. It doesn't need much, she said. But it stays, even through frost. One morning, she brought out an envelope. I had this printed, she said. I don't know if I'll ever send it, but I wrote it for me. Inside was a letter to Jaden. Not a threat, not forgiveness, a final word. You didn't end me, you only paused me. The parts of me you feared, my voice, my joy, my independence, they're back now, louder than ever, and I no longer carry your name. Only mine. Only Leona's daughter. I folded it carefully. That's the last thing he'll never read, I said. Tamra smiled. And the first thing I finally released. A year after the fall, we stood together in the east-facing room. The orchid was blooming again. Her journals now filled an entire shelf. The empty boxes were gone. The trauma wasn't, but it no longer sat at the center. Do you think I'm whole? She asked me quietly. I wrapped my arm around her. No, I said, you're more than whole. You're rewritten. The east-facing room always smelled like lavender now. The sunlight warmed the windowsill just right by 7:15 a.m., and if the orchid had a heartbeat, I swear it would have fluttered then like it was waking up beside Tamara, quietly honoring her new rhythm. She had fallen into something steady, not stagnant, just calm. After a year of turbulence, her life was no longer shaped by fear or flashbacks. It was shaped by little things, the click of a kettle before sunrise, the scribble of her pen on journal pages, the way she hummed off-key while sorting laundry. She was no longer rebuilding. She was living. I came by that morning with banana bread and the Sunday paper. It was just what we did. No planning, no knocking. I let myself in and called out, "Coffee ready, or should I bring my own?" She was already at the table, barefoot, wrapped in a pale sweater, her glasses low on her nose, reading something printed on thick paper. I could tell it wasn't just the news. When she looked up, her face was soft, no tears, just thoughtfulness. I reread it, she said. The letter to Jaden? She nodded. Then I wrote another. I froze. She reached into a folder beside her and slid the page across the table. I didn't touch it, just watched her eyes as they traced every word like they were walking a path she'd memorized. I'm not sending it, she added, but I needed to say it, for me. I leaned closer and read silently. Jaden, I am not writing to curse you. That part of me is long gone. I am writing to release you. You will never know the weight of the life you tried to end. You'll never sit with the women who say, because of your story, I found my voice. You'll never see me plant lavender or hear me laugh until I cry at something simple. That is the real punishment, your absence from everything beautiful that followed. And I've decided not to carry the wreckage anymore. Not because you deserve peace, but because I do. Goodbye, Tamra. When I looked up, she said nothing. She didn't have to. We sat for a long moment in the quiet, broken only by the clink of my spoon against the inside of my mug. I used to think closure meant confrontation, she said softly, but it's not. Closure is private. Sometimes it's a sentence you whisper alone at a kitchen table. That afternoon, we went to the shelter together. The After Project's mobile team was hosting an art day. Survivors and their children painting murals, designing affirmation posters, building memory jars. Tamra moved through the crowd, not like a leader but like someone who understood. A little girl with dark eyes and braids handed her a painted rock. It's a ladybug, she said proudly. They bring luck. Tamra crouched beside her, smiled. Then I'll keep it with me always. Later, while the others cleaned up, Tamra found me sitting near the back fence. I've been thinking, she said. That always means something big. She smiled. I want to tell my story in full, not just essays, a book. I blinked. Really? I think I'm ready, but I don't want it to be about Jaden. I want it to be about survival, about what comes next, about my mother, about the porch swing, about how I found my way home. My eyes filled before I could help it. You write it, I whispered. I'll edit it with banana bread in one hand and a red pen in the other. We laughed. Then she said something that stopped me cold. I want you to write your part too, from your eyes, your voice. I'm not the survivor, I said. You're the reason I became one. That night, we lit a candle under the oak tree. No ritual, no performance, just a flicker of light where darkness once ruled. I watched her from the porch as she sat cross-legged in the grass, one hand over the patch where Jaden's ring still lay buried. Not to mourn, to remember, and to declare, this pain does not own me. A week later, Tamara got a call from the publisher who had printed her essay. They were interested in the book idea, wanted a proposal. I haven't even started, she told them. That's okay, they replied. You already lived it. So she began. She set up a desk in the east-facing room, taped quotes on the wall, bought notebooks that smelled like new beginnings, and she wrote, not every day, not always easily, but steadily, honestly. She wrote about the coffee mug that shattered when Jaden screamed at her over a missed dinner, about the time he convinced her she had memory problems when really he'd just hidden her planner, about the way the staircase creaked louder than her voice that day. But she also wrote about Harper, about me, about Gloria and Marcus and Lavender, about laughter under warm quilts and the first time she swam again without fear. One evening, she called and asked me to come over. When I arrived, she was holding the ladybug rock in one hand and a small velvet box in the other. I've been holding on to this, she said. Inside was her original engagement ring, not Jaden's, the one from Marcus. I blinked. He proposed? She nodded, laughing softly. Yesterday, under the oak. Said he wasn't trying to erase anything, just add to the story. And I said yes. I pulled her into my arms and cried like I did the day she was born. Because sometimes the world breaks us open not to wound but to make room. Tamara never did send either letter to Jaden, but she buried them both beside the peony. They're not mine anymore, she said. They're stories I survived, not stories I live. And as we sat on the porch swing that night, two women, two lifetimes, we looked out toward the street, the moon casting soft light across the yard. I whispered, "What comes next?" She smiled. Everything. It was late September when Tamara painted the sign. Just a piece of smooth cedar, hand-cut by Marcus, letters carefully stenciled in black. She sanded the edges herself, sealed it against the weather, and hung it above the new door of the After Project's first standalone center. No longer just mobile. No longer borrowed church basements or shared community rooms. This was theirs. A 2-story brick building near the heart of town, with wide windows and a wraparound porch. Tamara called it a home for voices. A place for women to come not when they were fixed, but when they were ready to be seen, exactly as they were. The name on the door read, The After Project, a home for survivors. And beneath it, in smaller script, in honor of every woman who stayed and every woman who left. The grand opening was simple, by Tamara's design. No press, no speeches. Just music from a string quartet, lemonade with mint leaves, trays of cornbread and deviled eggs brought by volunteers, and quiet tears that slipped down cheeks like rain falling through sunlight. I stood with Harper near the entrance, watching as Tamara greeted guests. Women hugged her like a sister. Some had gray streaks in their hair, others were barely out of their teens. One walked with a cane, one carried a baby on her hip. All of them had stories. And Tamara met each one with the same unwavering gaze. Not pity, not pride, just presence. I remember when she couldn't look people in the eye, Harper whispered beside me. Look at her now. Marcus, steady and warm, refilled drinks, and offered everyone a smile that said, "You're safe here." Inside, the rooms had names instead of numbers. The front sitting area was the porch. The second-floor meeting space was the lavender room. And the small, quiet corner with a bookshelf and armchair, Tamara called that one east-facing. Because light should always be the first thing you see, she said. She gave me a private tour after the guests left. Here's the crisis intake office, she said, and over here is the therapy suite. We're partnering with 2 licensed counselors. One is bilingual. She was glowing. And this, she said, unlocking a small door near the back hallway, is the archive. Inside were shelves filed stories from survivors, anonymized but preserved, essays, letters, artwork, evidence not for a courtroom, but for truth, proof that what happened mattered. That they mattered. Every woman who wants to tell her story gets a place here, Tamara said, her voice steady. Not to relive the pain, but to own it. I nodded, speechless. Then she handed me a printed page in a folder. "What's this?" "My first chapter," she said. "From the book." I opened it. There was no title on the top, just a sentence that stretched across the page like a banner. He tried to end me with silence. So I answered with sound. I looked up, tears welling. "You're not just writing a book, Tamara," I said. "You're writing testament." That night, back at her house, we sat under the oak tree again. The peony and lavender were in full bloom, their roots thick now, grounded in soil that had once carried secrets. Tamara held a mug of tea, the ladybug rock resting near her feet. "Do you know what I realized today?" she said. "What, baby?" "That Jaden never truly knew me, not the real me. The part that sings off-key, that cries during dog food commercials, that dances with soup spoons in hand." I laughed. "That's the best part, and it's mine again." The porch light flickered on as the sun dipped low. The cicadas hummed. The air smelled like honey and leaves. Tamara turned to me, serious now. "I want you to write your name in the book, too, as a co-author, as the woman who kept me alive when I forgot how." I shook my head. "I didn't do anything special." "You loved me," she said. "You stayed. That's everything." I didn't reply. I just reached over, took her hand, and squeezed it. We sat like that for a while, 2 generations of women who had faced the storm and chosen not to stay wet. Later, Marcus came out with a blanket and draped it over Tamara's shoulders. She leaned into him without hesitation. No fear, no flinching. He didn't rescue her. He walked beside her. And that, I realized, was what made all the difference. There was no dramatic twist waiting, no old ghosts knocking on the door. Just life. Soft, earned, ongoing. A week later, Tamara's book deal was finalized. The release was set for the following spring. She decided to call it What Grew After the Fall, a story of survival, silence, and rebirth. The publisher wanted a subtitle. Tamara offered one without hesitation. Told by a daughter and her mother? The night before the book release, Tamara couldn't sleep. She didn't say she was nervous, not out loud. But I saw it in the way she stood at the kitchen window, watching the wind ruffle the curtains like it might carry something in or carry something out. "I've said it all, haven't I?" she asked softly. "You've said what matters," I replied. She nodded, but didn't look away from the glass. "I keep thinking of all the women who didn't get to tell their story, who didn't make it, who didn't have a porch to sit on, or a mother who didn't stop digging. You're not speaking for them," I said gently. "You're making sure they weren't forgotten." Outside, the trees swayed in the dark. She turned back to me, wrapped her arms around herself the way she used to as a child when she was afraid of storms. "I don't want Jaden to be the end of my story." "He isn't," I said. "He's not even the middle. You wrote past him." And she had. The next morning, the bookstore was buzzing before the doors opened. It wasn't a flashy launch, no banners, no red carpet. Just rows of chairs, a modest podium, and a stack of paperbacks with Tamara's name on the spine. Tamara wore a cream blouse, jeans, and the simple gold chain I gave her on her 16th birthday. No makeup, just the light in her eyes. I sat in the front row, beside Marcus, Harper, Gloria, and half the staff from the After Project. Even the girl who had once given her a ladybug rock was there now, taller, with braces and her hair in a high ponytail. When Tamara stepped to the mic, the room went quiet. She didn't read from the book. She didn't rehearse a speech. She just stood there, took a breath, and said, "I was pushed down a staircase by the man who said he loved me. I woke up in silence, and I chose not to stay there." Then, after a pause, she added, "This book isn't about him. It's about what I built after him." A wave of emotion rippled through the room. Some cried, some nodded, some clutched the book to their chest like a lifeline. Tamara spoke of rebuilding, of truth-telling, of how the body remembers but the heart can still forgive itself. She spoke of mothers and daughters and rooms that face east, of lavender and light, of survival that looks like living, not just breathing. And then she closed her speech with this: "He tried to erase me, but I grew roots in the space he left behind. He thought he buried me, but he didn't know I was a seed." The applause was quiet at first, almost reverent. Then it rose, like thunder rolling across a long, open sky. Afterward, we signed copies side by side, her name, then mine. Tamra and Leona, mother and daughter, survivor and witness. And when it was over, we walked out into the sunlight, hand in hand. Outside the bookstore, a reporter stopped her. "What do you hope readers take away from your story?" she asked. Tamara didn't hesitate. "That no matter what was taken from you," she said, "there's still something worth growing." Later that evening, we sat on the porch. The air smelled like rain and distant honeysuckle. Tamara leaned back on the swing, her eyes half closed. "You know," she murmured, "there was a time I thought I'd never want to be known again, that I'd never trust a crowd with my truth. And now I realize. It's not about trusting them, it's about trusting me, that I can stand in a room and still be whole when I leave." I reached over and squeezed her hand. She looked down at the peony and lavender, both bending in the breeze. "There are no villains here anymore," she said. "Just shadows that used to scare me, and roots that know how to hold me." As the sky darkened, the porch light flicked on. Tamara stood and walked to the edge of the yard. She crouched down and placed something in the soil right at the foot of the peony bush. I followed. It was the ladybug rock, faded a little now, but still whole. She pressed it into the dirt gently, like a marker, or a promise. Then she looked up at me and said, "That's the last word." And she was right, because after everything, after betrayal and silence, pain and shame, she had claimed the one thing no one could ever take again, her voice, and she had used it to build something that would outlast us both. A home, a book, a garden, a legacy, not of pain, but of rising. This story teaches us that survival is not the end, rebirth is. Pain may break us, betrayal may silence us, but there is power in choosing to rise, to speak, and to rebuild. Tamra's journey reminds us that healing doesn't mean erasing the past, it means planting something beautiful where the hurt once lived. Most of all, it reminds every woman, your voice is your power, and it's never too late to reclaim it.